What's up, Bills Mafia? Fernando Schmude here with another Leading the Charge. Today, talking about preseason and training camps having been finished and preseason starting just around the corner. And I have the pleasure to add Nate for Circling the Wagons podcast. Welcome, Nate. So, thank you so much for accepting my invitation and being here with us to talk about preseason and training camps. The house is yours.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on, Fernando. I've been following you for a while, so it's cool that we can finally hook up like this. And I'm actually going to the game on Saturday, so I'm actually more excited about that. I'm taking my 7-year-old for the first time. He's going to experience a Bills game, Bills Mafia, and stuff like that. So no, I'm really excited. Thanks, appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I've been lucky recently because uh, I had Anthony last week and he was ready to go to the scrimmage, and watch the scrimmage and follow it closely. And now I have Nate with me today and he's ready to go to the game so we can have a great talk about this Bills football. And finally, football is back. We can finally say it out loud because, yes, it's preseason, but there is a lot to see. There is a lot to still talk about during this preparation for the next season, right, Nate? With a lot of competitions going on and training camp just ending on a high note with McDermott really calling it very productive. And so I want to start talking about this training camp so we can close it out and then focus on the game. And with all those competitions, how do you feel about? Do you have some horses on those races, or people who you are rooting for, or you are just hoping for the best and whoever wins and you will root for them anyway? How do you feel about those competitions, man?
So there's a few different competitions, we've been watching since, or we've been, picking out since before the preseason or training camp even started, right? So, like, you have middle linebacker, cornerback two, even slot wide receiver, right guard, with the addition of Osiris Torrance. So there's a lot of things that I've been paying attention to. Like there's good battles, and then there's like let's hope somebody emerges. So the good ones are like right guard, right? Like, because no matter what, we have some talent there between Ryan Bates and the rookie Osiris Torrance. My co-host John, he loves Osiris Torrance. I mean, we all love shiny new toys, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's what he is.
Especially when a guy is powerful as he is, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's a demon. He's a monster, right? So I'm really excited about him. I just think that knowing this coaching staff, especially after seeing the depth chart, they had Ryan Bates listed as their starting right guard. It wasn't like like they did with middle linebacker, like Tyrell Dotson slash, Terrell Bernard, or like cornerback two, where it was like Dane Jackson slash Kyer Elam slash, Christian Benford. Like, it wasn't like that for right guard. Right guard is Ryan Bates unless there's an injury or unless Osiris Torrance just shows up. So I've been paying attention to that. I think that they're going to stay conservative with that. Bates has the experience, standing between Morse and Spencer Brown for all of last season, and even longer than that, being a left guard. So he has experience with those guys. I think that that's a position, especially in pass blocking, you do not want to miss out on. So, I mean, it's one thing, like, if cornerback two isn't the greatest or whatever, you can switch him out for another guy. It's like, but no, when you're protecting your franchise quarterback, you better be sure that you have the right guy that can handle that, that knows everything. And I think Osiris Torrance is potentially the better long-term answer. Just like Dorian Williams might be potentially the better long-term answer at middle linebacker, even though he hasn't gotten any snaps at middle linebacker since in camp.
Yeah.
I think that they're just going a more conservative route, and I completely respect that, and I get that. So I'm excited for that. Cornerback two. Now, again, just like right guard, it's like, just we have some good options. We'll just take the best option out of the three. So I don't really care necessarily who it is. It's kind of disappointing it's not Kyer Elam, if I'm being honest. It's kind of disappointing just because of his first round draft status. He is the more athletic cornerback of all three. He was the highest picked out of all three. There was a lot of excitement when he was drafted, and he just can't see. I mean, he made some really flashy plays last season for the Buffalo Bills, and there was a few interceptions. He ended that Dolphins playoff game with that breakup on Jalen Waddle. Like that was his play on fourth down, I believe. And so there's a lot. So then when OTA start and they're like, well, he's not necessarily going to be handed the starting job. And I'm like, okay, well, it's a little weird, but okay.
Yeah.
Well, they don't necessarily want to hand guys the jobs or whatever. They usually stay pretty mum's the word on starting positions. But the more that's gone on, like he's gotten some reps. I don't know if it's a matter of he's just not ready versus the other guys are doing great or vice versa. So again, not the worst thing in the world, but it's something to keep your eye on. My favorites though, I mean, Ryan Bates, I love Ryan Bates, but I love the potential of Osiris Torrance. I love Kaiir Elam's potential, but I love the idea of drafting a 6th-round cornerback in Christian Benford that could potentially, be a starter on this team long term. So I love that idea. Other roles like wide receiver 3, like we don't really talk about that a whole lot. I think we all figured it would be Khalil Shakir, but it sounds like it's been going between Shakir and Hardy. So I'm excited. All I want, honestly, is someone that's maybe not as good as Cole Beasley. I don't think we'll find someone like that, but someone that's better than Isaiah McKenzie.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Isaiah McKenzie, I think he was a great locker room guy. I think he had a lot of potential. He could just never put it together on the field after like 5 or 6 seasons. So, and you think about last season where the Bills really struggled was in that slot position because Jameson Crowder was injured and McKenzie just never really panned out. They just never got on the same page chemistry wise. So when we're talking about, preseason football, like those guys, like I'm really interested to see when the bullets are flying, how well they're going to do because scrimmages are different, than non-padded practices or padded practices. I mean, when we're going to look, towards the preseason, I mean, not necessarily those battles because I think, those battles are definitely going to be. I mean, well, the middle linebacker battle as it is right now. I mean, Tyrell Dodson's got the job because Terrell Bernard is injured, right? So, I mean, barring some crazy unforeseen circumstance, I imagine that Tyrell Dodson is going to be the leader in the clubhouse going into the season.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with a muscular problem, those tends to linger, and so I feel bad for Bernard for having this issue right now when he was so close to being able to maybe win this job, right? But I feel like Dodson has been one of the biggest, and that's one of the things that I want to ask you today. I feel like Dodson has been one of the biggest winners during these training camps because I really believe the plan, Nate, to this middle linebacker was like going Bernard and maybe later on moving to Dorian in time when he's ready. But those are guys who, when Bean had that interview talking about Edmonds maybe not being an interchangeable piece with Milano, when you look at those guys, those maybe are the guys who might be able to be interchangeable with Milano. Dodson, again, he can play at his best, but he won't be an interchangeable piece with Milano. So he might not be the kind of linebacker they really want alongside Milano. So that's why I feel like the plan was Bernard, and maybe if he doesn't pan out, Dorian later. And Dodson could never hand out the job. He was like, no, I'm going to play so well that they will need to consider me and give me a shot. I feel like this about Dodson, and he's probably getting his shot at least during this first part of preseason, right?
Yeah, I love that you brought up Dodson being a winner because I agree with you. I mean, he never gave up that job to Terrell Bernard. And, I mean, hats off to Terrell Bernard because he never played middle linebacker in college. He didn't line up there last season. And he wasn't, I mean, there was a big learning curve from being Matt Milano's understudy, which he didn't do too great at when given the opportunity, versus, him taking on a whole new role in middle linebacker and take it he deserves a lot of credit for being able to, compete for that and almost get it. But Tyrell Dodson, man, like they've been trying to, like, they like him, don't get me wrong, but last season when Tremaine Edmonds was down, I think it was like 3.5 games he didn't play. Mm-hmm. The backup was Tyrell Dodson for 2.5 of those games. And then they must not have liked what they saw because they brought in AJ Klein for that last game. I forget exactly. I don't know if it was the Viking or the Lions game or something like that. I can't remember which one it was, but
I believe
uh,
it was the Vikings game. I'm not sure.
Vikings game. Okay, yeah, yeah, and they tried to replace him there. If you notice, like any of the training camp notes I've read, it doesn't sound like AJ Klein's getting any run in middle linebacker. So like it sounds like he's won that role, and staved off AJ Klein. So I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for that. Again, I don't know if that's a matter of he's just that good or the Bills just don't have a lot of depth at that role specifically. But yeah, I mean, credit to him. I mean, it's funny if you really look at it. So we did a podcast for Circling Wagons where we said who's going to be the next middle linebacker for the Buffalo Bills, like based on. And if you look at Dorian Williams, Terrell Bernard, Tyrell Dodson, even AJ Klein, I mean, they're all within like 6 foot to 6'1". They're all between like 225 to 235 pounds. They're all almost the same exact player size wise. So there's
Mhm.
no, Tremaine Edmonds,
Yeah.
comparable size wise. There never is really in the NFL in general. But um, I went into it thinking, okay, they're going to use Terrell Bernard, AJ Klein on potential rundowns, and then bring in I'm sorry, Tyrell Dodson, AJ Klein, and then bringing Terrell Bernard for like pass downs because he's much better in coverage than Tyrell Dodson. But we haven't really seen anything like that. It's going to be interesting, but yeah, and I think honestly, like unless Tyrell Dodson stands out like crazy this season, I think they're either going to give it to Dorian Williams or Terrell Bernard next season, or draft someone else. I think that's the long term answer, but. I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe we found something. Maybe it clicks in year 4 or 5 or whatever it is for Tyrell Dodson, and we'll see from there.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you think Tyrell Dodson, you wouldn't think like, oh, okay, that's a guy you want to stay on the field for 3 downs. But when you hear McDermott talking about that position, that's the green dot guy. He won't be comfortable maybe taking him out of the field on passing downs and things like that because who's gonna call the plays then? And so that's a position that ideally play all the snaps, right, on the defensive side of the ball. And I feel like Dodson has been a winner because he has showed enough to make the McDermott and the coaching staff believe he can stay on the field on those passing downs. Probably with Dodson being the first one to get the shot during the season, we can see more of Taylor Rapp on clear third and long situations or something like that. But I really believe it will be a matter of how well the entire defense can play with Dodson as the middle linebacker. Maybe if the defense struggles early against the Jets, against the Raiders, maybe it's an opportunity, a door opening to Bernard get the job and get his opportunity. But not only Dodson struggling, because maybe Dodson can just play as we saw in the past, doing his job, not popping out, but not being awful. And if the defense plays well this way, entirely around him, okay, that's good. You don't need to mess up with this. But if the defense struggles, they might go this direction of going to a guy who fits better the mode of what they believe. Having two guys like Matt Villano, they can send uh, via blitzes, or they can drop in coverage, run with tight ends, run with even some slot receivers. Then I don't see Dodson being able to do this part of the game, and maybe Bernard and Dorian uh, fit better if they ask this for their middle linebacker. That's my expectation. And when you talked about Bates, it's good to hear from you, Nate, about being a fan of Bates because I'm also a big fan of Ryan Bates. I felt really bad when everybody it seemed like everybody had their opportunity to get a shot at that offensive line back in the day when they were struggling. Everybody but Ryan Bates. And when he finally got his shot, he showed that he was by far the best option there, right? And improved our level of offensive line play. And now again, maybe with Torrance being this shiny new toy, a powerful guy, a people mover, a guy who can add something that we don't have in this offensive line. Uh, I really don't feel like Bates is worse than McGovern. I actually would like to see more of McGovern and to see if we really can say that Bates isn't a better option than McGovern. But McGovern is also a shiny new toy, so Bates is in a bad spot right now. I believe. What do you think about it?
Yeah, Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about Ryan Bates and his struggle to get on the roster because, not in the roster, I'm sorry, in the starting lineup. Because
Yeah.
if you remember, it was the 2021 season. So 2 seasons ago was the 13-second season. The Bills were struggling offensively. And then it wasn't until they had a few injuries at left guard that they finally put in Ryan Bates there. And then that offensive line as a unit looked like a completely different offensive line. They were able to run the ball up the middle, which was, almost unheard of up until that point.
Mhm.
They were able to protect Josh Allen longer. He had time. I mean, I'm convinced, all things being equal, like that was one of the major reasons why they went on a run like they did, is because for once Josh Allen had a solidified offensive line at probably up until that point the best offensive line he had in front of him, because they had Deion Dawkins, Ryan Bates now, which I'm still convinced he might be better at left guard than right guard.
Mhm.
Uh, so then he had Ryan Bates, Mitch Morris, which we love, and then they had was Darrell Williams at right guard and Spencer Brown at right tackle, I believe. So like they had good pieces in place, and they were actually able to run to the left side of the line, and they look good. And that's again one of the reasons why I thought they looked so good between the Patriots playoff game and the Chiefs playoff game. But like I haven't heard a ton about Connor McGovern. I heard he's been like okay, right? Like so he is the shiny new toy. He is the big free agent acquisition that the Bills have, that they invested the most amount of money in. And I think he sounds like he's okay. Like he sounds like he's doing his job, not
Mhm.
overly great, because they gave David Edwards, the starting guard from the Rams that they acquired in the offseason, they gave him some reps too at over Connor McGovern. So just probably to see, just to get him in there, just to get some chemistry. But um, yeah, I mean, I went in thinking that this interior offensive line was going to be, the best it's ever been, and I still think it is on paper. But we'll see when the bullets are flying. We'll see through some of these preseason games, I'm sure, how it is. But no, I really like Ryan Bates, like you. I can't remember, honestly. I can't remember the initial question you asked Fernando. If I answered it, let me know. If I didn't.
Yeah, you did. You did. Yeah, about Bates, about feeling bad about him being so late to take his advantage. And now, like, we have McGovern, we have Torrance, and he's again the odd man out, maybe, right? And I remember an interview from the former Titans left tackle. Uh, just forgot his name, man.
It's,
People
it's
hate
not
him.
it's not Tyron Smith, is it?
Lewan, Taylor Lewan, Taylor
Taylor
Lewan.
Lewan. Okay. Yep.
Yes, and he was talking during the combine, and I remember I think it was Rich Eisen who asked him if he could play right tackle, and he said no, no way he could play right tackle because he was awful there. He was like, no, you can put anybody but me there, and they will do a better job than me at right tackle. And he mentioned something like when you are an offensive lineman, if you do too many things, you are the last one to be picked because they will have you as that great backup guy who can play everywhere but not start. And I feel like Bates is falling in this tier of offensive linemen for so many people, and I feel bad for him because I really like the way he plays, how smart he is, how he can really be sound technically and help this offensive line to play well.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. It does kind of. I mean, if you're good at, what is it? What do they say, the jack of all trades, master of none, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels like that's where he is. But I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, I don't know if you were going to eventually get to losers of training camp, but like, I mean, it sounds like Spencer Brown's kind of in that mix again.
Yeah.
And even not so much Deion Dawkins, but I think we're just realizing how important he is, that if he doesn't have if he has like another season where he's trending downward like last season, like that could be potentially very bad for the Buffalo Bills. So I'd say tackles are one of the losers from training camp.
Mhm.
Um, and Spencer Brown, I mean, I was hoping, so I'm one of those guys, Fernando, that like I thought it was kind of a weakness to begin with. And, I listened to what McDermott and Bean were saying about him. Well, he was injured. He didn't have a true, because he had that COVID year and all the things that Anthony mentioned on your podcast last week. So, like, I get that, right?
Mhm.
But he hasn't proven anything at all
Yeah.
to show that he should absolutely be the starter. So when I was doing mock drafts, like I did not rule out right tackle if one fell to me, at 24 or whatever the Bills picked. Like I was totally in for it, depending on who it was and if I thought they were a first round talent. And it turns out that still might be the position that is one of the weakest on the roster. And I think it was too much was projected on Spencer Brown being that right tackle. Like, I mean, there's possibilities. Like, I don't like saying it, but maybe going right tackle instead of Osiris Torrance in the second round this year. You probably could have gotten a starter at that position. The Bills do not like to give up on rookies, and Joe Marino mentioned this on his podcast. That's why he didn't think the Bills would go linebacker early, because somebody on his show, one of the listeners mentioned, like, they don't give up on guys after one or two seasons, especially one season. So, like, they thought that Terrell Bernard was going to get a shot, and he did. They didn't draft anyone until the third round. And the same thing with right tackle. They did not go after right tackle, and which would have been. I mean, I kind of wish they had, but Ryan Bates is now one of those things where I consider him potentially, if they have to, starting for right tackle. Especially because I was hoping Brandon Shell would be a good right tackle replacement, just in case Spencer Brown, struggled again this season. He has experience. I was reading the Dolphins fans, message boards, and they were like, "The guy's solid depth. He played well. We're gonna miss him." Like that's how I determine if someone's a good free agent that the Bills are, signing. I look at like the other message boards. I look at SB Nation. I look at the Dolphins message boards. Like as soon as a guy leaves, if they're all like good, great, then I'm just like, ah, man, that stinks. But if they're all like, you know what, like good for him, like so then I was excited for him. But it sounds like he's been not awful, but not exactly great so far this camp. So, and then Spencer Brown sounds like he's still got a recurring back issue. I talked with Kyle Trimble from Banged Up Bills last night on the Buffalo Late Show podcast on Cover One, and like he's like, this is an issue where he had a microdiscectomy. Okay, and that's where they remove part of your disc that's touching a nerve. And someone like I actually had two of those in the last year and a half, so like I know exactly what it's like. I was just trying to walk and sit and stand like normal, so I can't imagine what it'd be like to try to take on Matthew Judon with that sort of injury. So I do have some sympathy for Spencer Brown, but he doesn't have a ton of experience in the position in general from college. He doesn't have a ton of experience like at the NFL level, and not a lot of great experience, a lot of successful experience. I was just talking with Anthony, on our podcast this last Thursday, and he's like, it's so funny. We went to training camp, and Spencer Brown on one rep took care of Greg Rousseau, arguably one of the best pass rushers on the Buffalo Bills. And then the next pass blocking rep, it was a one-on-one. He completely, lost on the same exact move to Boogie Basham, which I don't think anybody that's a Bills fan would argue that Boogie Basham is better than Greg Rousseau. So it's just like, I don't know what it is. It sounds like it's technique. It sounds like it's, I'm just hoping he puts it together. I'm hoping he can put the injuries and technique behind him. But if not, maybe we have an ace up our sleeve with Ryan Bates, because he is one of the few guys on the roster that can play most of the positions. I don't think the Bills want him to, because I think they want him to be the backup center, and I think he's going to be the starting right guard or backup interior depth in general in case there's an injury. But I mean, man, like it feels like we're out of options at this point.
Yeah, so. Man, and I'm glad you pointed to that direction, because I've been thinking about this since the beginning of training camp, and actually thinking about, let's see if they're gonna give him some snaps there. Do you think the coaching staff might be failing Bates again, just like they failed him when they took too long to give him an opportunity with the starters back when he got his first shot with the starters? Do you think they are failing him, not giving him some snaps at the right tackle position? Because look, Shell isn't really doing anything to pop out as a great replacement for Brown. Brown is questionable, no doubt about that. But yeah, McDermott loves him, Bean loves him, and he has all the potential in the world, the athletic ability, but he's a question mark. He's a question mark ability-wise, and he's a question mark from the injury standpoint, just like you said about his back problems. And Bates played right tackle at Penn State. He came to the Bills as a left tackle when the Bills traded for him. He came from the Eagles, right, as a left tackle. And then he started to play left tackle and backup center. And then he finally got his shot as a guard. Man, I'd like really to see Bates getting some snaps at right tackle because, yeah, he might not be the ideal right tackle long term, but I believe Ryan Bates is a better football player today than Spencer Brown, or at least a guy who I can trust more than Spencer Brown. So don't you think they should have been using him there already in the training camp, and you could maybe see some snaps of Ryan Bates during preseason when the real game situations arrive?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Everything you said makes complete sense to me. And from a schematic point of view, from a talent point of view, it absolutely makes sense. And should they, when they brought in Osiris Torrance for right guard, should they have had him maybe playing next to Ryan Bates maybe for right tackle, or, getting him some reps there? I'm sure they wanted Osiris Torrance just to get some chemistry between Mitch Morse and Spencer Brown, just in case, just like they got David Edwards, some work in at, left guard between, Dean Dawkins and Mitch Morse. Yes. But so we're looking at it from a standpoint of talent, which I 100% agree with you. But one thing that we're not taking into account is the fact that how that would look to Spencer Brown, because they've been treating him kind of like with kid gloves, like defending him at every, which I'm glad they're doing, by the way. Like you have to understand that they don't want to call these guys out unless they think it's an effort issue. Then they'll call them out. They don't want to call him out just for like struggles. I mean, they've gone out of their way to defend the guy. To have him step out and lose right tackle reps to another guy, like that could potentially be bad mentally and psychologically to Spencer Brown and maybe the rest of the team. I don't think they treat every player like that, mind you, but I think with that, it's not like they're replacing him with the backup right tackle, like a Quessenberry or Brandon Michelle or whatever, right? Like they're not giving away Spencer Brown reps to those guys. They're giving his reps away to another starter because they think that other starter would be better than him as a starter. And that just has bad optics. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
Would I prefer them to do that? Absolutely. But at the same time, like he does have experience in it, so I'm not as worried. I think Ryan Bates, we were talking about the jack of all trades, master of none. I just don't think he stands. I think from the coaching standpoint, they are doing a disservice from him, and that's one of the reasons why I don't think he got into the lineup until there were so many injuries, and then they finally recognized his talent. But like, I think Anthony mentioned it really well on your podcast last week. Is he's like, let's say he was talking about Terrell Bernard and Tyrell Dodson. Let's say Terrell Bernard is like a 6.5 out of 10 in like overall in everything, right? Like he's a steady 6.5 out of 10. And then you have, Tyrell Dodson, who's an 8 in like the run, but maybe he's only a 4 or 5 in the pass. It's like, but he stands out a lot in those one things. Like maybe Spencer Brown. I mean, he has an incredible RAS score, and I think everyone kind of hangs their hat on that, his relative athletic score. But like Ryan Bates just might be that steady guy that's just good at a lot of things, not amazing at any of them. So I mean, yes, I agree 100% with you. I'd like to see him, and I would not rule that out. One of the good things about this coaching staff is, they're willing to admit their mistakes and, find the right guys to play in instead of just saying, we're just going to put this guy in because of draft stats. We're going to put this guy in because of, where he fit, how much we signed him for. If Connor McGovern is really, really struggling and he turns out to be a liability like Roger Saffold ended up being, I would not be surprised if Ryan Bates goes over to left guard and we see Osiris Torrance at right guard, playing for him. I'm not surprised, or maybe even David Edwards, whoever it is. But maybe potentially the same thing with Spencer Brown. So we'll see. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a Ryan Bates fan. I have that. He's one of those guys that you cling on to. You see like a little bit of a spark, and you're like, that guy might be something. And then he finally gets his chance, and he does. I'm trying to think of other players. He reminds me of maybe like Stevie Johnson. Guys like that. Jabari Greer, I remember, was like that. The corner when he finally got his shot, guys like that. So yeah, I agree. They are kind of doing him a disservice by doing that, but I understand the optics behind it.
Awesome. What do you think, Bills Mafia? If you are here live with us or watching in another moment, let comment in the comment section via YouTube so we can know your opinion about not just Ryan Bates, but who are your biggest winners or losers from training camp. We're gonna close it out for a little bit more and then talk preseason. Quick pause for our sponsors. So, Nate, to close out the preseason conversation, to the training camp conversation, if tomorrow the game were against the Jets and not against the Colts, and it were week one instead of preseason week one, who would you see as the biggest winners, the guys who really got the job during these training camps? In your opinion? For me, defensively, I already listed Dodson, right? I'd like to list it two both sides, okay? Two defensively, two offensively, and for me, it's Dodson on the defensive side. I think he really held down that spot and didn't allow the Bills to easily make a transition, maybe to their favorite guys, the guys who they draft to become the key pieces in Edmonds' place. So Dodson for sure is one of the winners, and the other one, in my opinion, Dane Jackson, and for this very same reason as I told about Dodson, I think Dane Jackson has played in a so sound way, in a so right way, the way you should play that cornerback spot, communication wise and technically wise, that even with Elam having, it's not the case of Bernard, who doesn't have game tape and experience at the position, but Elam had experience last year playing. He had a great game against the Dolphins in the playoffs. So Elam kind of earned the job, but still he can't pass Dane Jackson because the guy is simply doing everything right. So those are my two winners from training camp in the defensive side of the ball. How about yours?
Yeah, I liked what you mentioned earlier about Tyrell Dodson. I thought that was a good one. Dane Jackson is a great one also because everything you mentioned, like they're trying to give this position away to, the two younger guys, and Dane Jackson won't let them. I mean, he's fighting for it. I do think that McDermott does prefer to have veteran corners when he can have them. I mean, it seems like they always try to bring one in, like whether it was Levi Wallace before they brought him back on a one-year deal. They brought in, what is it, Kevin Johnson a few years ago, Josh Norman. Like, they like to have a veteran guy that they can trust on the other side of Tre'Davious White. So I think that's part of it. But then the other part is, like you said, he's not giving it up. I mean, if Kaiir Elam was truly better or Christian Benford were absolutely better, they would be giving them most of the reps. But I mean, Dane Jackson, he's one of those guys, seventh round guy. He's not giving up, and I give him a ton of credit for that. I really like that. One of the winners, which I don't think gets talked about a lot, but I just think about it more and more, especially after seeing the depth chart, is Daquan Jones. I'm really excited to have him back. I think he was one of the major reasons why this defense played it as good as it did when they did. I mean, Von Miller obviously is a great asset. He's the most important piece of that defensive line for the most part. But I think Daquan Jones is completely underrated. Um, he hasn't had a quiet camp, but if you look at the depth chart, I was thinking it might potentially be between he and Puna Ford at that one tech defensive tackle spot. And really, I mean, Puna Ford's listed third on the depth chart behind Tim Settle. And I don't know
Yeah.
if that's, again, optics-wise, because they don't want Tim Settle, who's been here longer than Puna Ford, to think that he lost that job or whatever. But I always looked at it as, after the season, they only have Ed Oliver signed to a long-term contract. They have no other defensive tackles. Daquan Jones is 33. Puna Ford is 28, I believe. So this is their audition to see who's going to be signed for at least a 1 or 2 or 3-year deal, maybe in Puna Ford's contract. Who's going to be the long-term guy at that position? And Daquan Jones has not given it up. So kudos to him for that. I'm really excited to see what he does again on this Bills defensive line. And yeah, so on offense, Oh, I'm sorry. You just wanted defense, right?
Yeah. No, but you can move on to offense. No problem. Let's go to the two on the offensive side. No
So
problem.
no, real quick though. I mean, besides because you already mentioned two of those guys, and I just seconded,
Mhm.
but AJ Epinesa, it sounds like he's had a really good camp. He's in a contract season. People are mentioning that he might be a trade asset. I don't necessarily see that. I think he's definitely got enough starting rep potential, and I don't think they're going to get nearly a second rounder for him because he's in a contract year. I mean, what are they going to get more? Maybe a fourth or fifth rounder at most. So I don't
Mhm.
see them trading him. He's under a cost control contract for one more season for this next season only. But I mean, he's playing a contract year, and I think that he's worth good depth. And I like what I've read about him. He's not giving up. He's keeping Boogie Basham buried on the depth chart, and so I mean, in some aspects, it sounds like he's playing almost to the level of Leonard Floyd. So I know it's going to be most likely Rousseau and Leonard Floyd if Von Miller's out the first week one. But I mean, AJ Epinesa again, one of those guys he's not vying for a starting role like Dane Jackson, but he's not giving up either. So he is one of my winners, though. Too, he's just not letting it. He's just not letting go of his position. We're to the point where I think that they're going to eventually cut Shaq Lawson and probably try to stash him on the practice squad because they like AJ Epinesa so much. So, on the offensive side of the ball, uh, one of the winners, uh, and I think it's kind of a surprise, especially because of the way that Bills fans, like myself too, have been so critical of him, is Gabe Davis. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, it looks like he's brought his play to another level. Some of that could be a contract year, the fact that he's in a contract year, and he's expected to make probably north of 14 to 15 million a year after this. Uh, Part of it could be the fact that he's finally healthy after dealing with that ankle sprain all last season. Uh, or it could just be that he took his game to the next level, talent wise and just workout wise. I mean, I don't know if you saw that podcast he did, where it was like a 30-40 minute video podcast on YouTube. For anyone that hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's the most you ever really see about Gabe Davis talking about his life, how he brought up. There was never in his mind, there was never a plan B. He's like, my plan always was to succeed in the NFL no matter what. I didn't come up with a
Yeah.
plan B. It's like that analogy of burning your ships, right? So you
Mhm.
arrive on shore, you burn your ship, so you can't go
Yeah.
back if things turn south, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and he's attacked this offseason that way. I mean, everyone saw that play he had over Kyer Elam, where I mean, he ran an incredible route, and he left him in his dust. So it was really cool to see. I love what he's brought so far in training camp, and hey, he could be one of the major reasons if the Bills make a deep postseason Super Bowl run. His success, I believe, is going to be hinged on that, along with the slot role and stuff like that. But like he succeeds and he has his best year yet, I think that puts the Bills in the conversation of a Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree, man. That's why I wanted so badly the Andre Hopkins, because I really thought like, okay, if you have two weapons like that, and you give two weapons like that to Josh Allen, man, he's gonna cook. And if Gabe Davis can play at this level, even better, because that's grow in Buffalo talent, well, talent grown in Buffalo, right? And you can pay him long term and keep him as Diggs' partner, and even maybe take over if he can take this next step. Everybody always praise how hard he works and how really wants to get better. So I'm really excited to see Gabe, and alongside him, I just said Cook, and no pun intended, but James Cook, man, James Cook really can take this offense to the next level. So it seems that he's done his job during training camp, and he's has impressed, and I really hope that's the case, and he can stay a lot on the field so he can be that home run hitter out of the backfield.
Yeah, I love that you brought up James Cook. He was going to be my other one too because I mean, when was the last time? It must have been LaShawn McCoy, maybe his second or first through third seasons or something with the Bills before his last season.
Mhm.
We haven't had a running back with that kind of speed in a long time. And the
Yeah.
fact that you could have a home run threat on any time that he touches the ball, I mean, that gets me going. And he is not, unlike other position battles that we've talked about, like there was potential if he wasn't playing as well as the coaching staff or maybe we would have liked. They might have put in Damian Harris and gotten him some first team reps, maybe more so than they did. So, but he has not given up that job. I'm really excited to see what he does. My only worry is pass blocking because he had a really low pass blocking grade last season for the Bills. But he's a rookie. He's smaller. A good offensive coordinator is going to find a way to scheme around that. I don't know if it's a matter of running more 22 personnel instead of 12 personnel or whatnot, but yeah, no, I love James Cook. I'm really excited to see what he does. I like Singletary a lot too, but I mean, it's great that he makes guys miss. But if you're not a threat to go the distance at any point, like that's such a, I don't know. It kind of puts like those things that you put on an engine so that it can't go as fast like they put on go-karts like governors, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like what we had the last 4 or 5 seasons at running back, and it's not his fault. I mean, it's just the way he was built. I mean, he was great in other aspects, but and I love Devin Singletary, but um, just every time he touches the ball, like he could go. So I would take being able to miss a couple or have a couple of DBs miss some tackles over a guy that could just hit the edge and just take off. So I'm really excited. I'm glad you said him because I agree with that one.
Yeah, Marcel mentioned here, I think Latavius Murray had a good camp. It seems that he's been taking advantage of the growing opportunities, right? Because that's a guy who was kind of stuck behind Harris and even Naheem Hines, and with Hines Niels and now Harris being a little bit shaken up, Murray is showing that he's still got some gas in that tank, right?
Yes, yes. I'm glad he brought up Latavius Murray because it's funny. I was thinking more like first, second teamers, and for all intents and purposes, I know Damian Harris technically. I mean, he has youth on his side and he has the higher ceiling on his side. But I love Latavius Murray. I had on one of the Buffalo Rumblings staff writer, Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy does the 90 players in 90 days article
Yeah.
on BuffaloRumblings.com. And Sean's a super great guy to talk to. And I was asking him that question. I'm like, who's a guy that you have under the radar that
Mhm.
you've been writing about that you're kind of like, this guy could be something? And he mentioned Latavius Murray, but even before the Naheem Hines injury.
Yeah.
And he's like, listen, he's 33 years old, but he's also 6'3", 230 pounds. Like he's a monster of a guy, and you don't think about that necessarily with Latavius Murray, but like he does have pass catching ability. He was used in that role a lot when he was with the Raiders. I mean, the guy, he doesn't have age on his side, but his last game with the Broncos, he had over 110 yards, I believe, on like 13 carries against the
Mhm.
San Diego Chargers or the Los Angeles Chargers, which the Los Angeles Chargers were vying for a playoff spot, so or for a better seed or whatever. So they were playing Justin Herbert. So it's not like they wanted to lose that game, and they ended up losing that game um, to the Broncos. The Broncos won that game, but Latavius Murray, I don't think he's done at all, and I think he could potentially like play for that role, especially with Damian Harris's injury history. So I do love that. I love that he brought that up, and I think that that's a guy that we could see getting some work in, either depending on injuries. I expect him to make the roster too.
Yeah, me too, man. And especially when you think about a big guy like that as a running back, you think, okay, that guy maybe doesn't have the speed. But when Latavius Murray was younger, he was really fast guy, despite being big. I remember when he was still with the Vikings, he had a crazy combo of speed and size. And even if he has lost a step by now at 32 years old, he's still pretty fast for his size. So that's an amazing combination to have, especially as a complement to James Cook, a guy that big that can really run hard. It's interesting, and I'm looking forward to watching him during preseason. So, quick break for the sponsors. So, Nate, preseason is starting this Saturday. You'll be there watching, right? Taking your son there to have the first experience of watching the Bills. And lucky him, because I still couldn't go, but I will. I will. One day I will, man. It will happen.
Yeah, you let me
Anyway,
know. You let me know when you want to come up, and I'll try to get tickets to that game, Fernando.
awesome, awesome,
Just so we can tailgate together
for
and hang
sure.
out for sure. Uh, but yeah, no, I'm really excited. I mean, it's the only preseason game in Buffalo this season. There's only 3 preseason games anymore because of the 17 game schedule. So this is
Yeah,
the only one that's in Buffalo. It's a kids' day game, so they start at like 9:30 in the morning. With doing kids' day activities. You get to take pictures with Billy Buffalo.
awesome.
My son's 7 years old, so he doesn't, he watches games with me, but he's still, it's still young. It's hard for
Mhm.
a kid that age to really keep concentration for 3 hours a day. But it's funny. I'll give a couple of my favorite moments, and I have 2 children. My daughter's actually, who's 4 years old, is going to come with us too, because we were actually able to get a couple more tickets. So I'm really excited that she can come. My
Awesome.
wife's coming. Like, this is going to be a fun family experience. Do I expect the kids to stay there until the fourth quarter? Absolutely not. We're probably going to leave by like the second or third quarter, just because of timing, and it's a lot for the kids. But um, one of my favorite memories as a father was when, so my son's 7. He was 2 years old, and my wife's one brother is a huge Bills fan, but the other brother is a huge Dolphins fan.
Oh
Of
my
course,
god.
right? I know. I want to disown him. Trust me. No, uh, he's super cool though. Like, he's one of those cool Dolphins fans. He's like, yeah, we suck, or like, we'll see. He's definitely not like the in your face Dolphins fan. So I
Got
definitely
it.
appreciate it. We always joke around. But his joke when my son was 2 would be at family gatherings. He'd be like, "Go Dolphins!" And my son, who was 2, would just go along with everything. You could tell him, daddy's terrible or whatever, like mommy's terrible, and he would have just, if he was
Yeah,
smiling and
repeat.
said it, he'd agree with you. And so he used to say, like, they'd be like, "Go Dolphins," and he'd be like, "Go Dolphins." And my proudest moment, and I never said anything because I'm like, whatever, like, he's 2. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna say, just let him have fun. They're just doing it just to have fun. But in the back of my head, like, I'm kind of stewing a little bit. I won't ever admit to them. I was stewing a little bit, like, I don't like you doing that, but okay, I'm gonna let it fly. It's just slide, right? When he became, I think it was 3 or 4, they tried to pull the same stunt with him at family get-togethers. He'd be like, "Oh no," he's like, "No, not go Dolphins, go Bills," and without me even prompting or saying anything. And it was kind of cool, kind of cute, like, to see that
awesome. Yeah.
transition from him being. It's funny. I tell this story. I probably haven't told this story in years on the podcast. But when we found out that we were having my son, it's because he was our firstborn. We took my parents out to breakfast one day, and we're like, "Oh, we're pregnant." They're like, "Oh, that's so awesome! Congratulations." They're like, "Oh, have you thought about religion and stuff like that?" I'm like, "Well, we haven't 100% figured out exactly what we're going to do with religion, but he's going to be a Bills fan. He's going to be a Bills fan." That's going to be one of the religions that we definitely bring them up on. So, much to my like 70-year-old parents' dismay, my Catholic 70-year-old parents, they were just like, "Whoa, whoa, what?" Like, it's funny that it is a religion. That's one of the cool things about it. I've been able to communicate with you and stuff like that, and it's a fun experience. Bills Mafia is a cool community.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm excited to share this experience with him at a
And
place
I
where.
I was around 7 when I actually met the Bills, via Super Bowl. So I
Oh,
was
wow.
around the same age as your son right now. And I was like, oh, I love the charging buffalo, the colors, and Thurman Thomas running around. That was what popped
Oh
out
yeah.
to me. And I hope your son can. Well, that's a preseason game, but still, I hope he can see somebody doing some awesome stuff and he can relate to it tomorrow.
Oh yeah, yeah. Me too. Me too. That's what I'm hoping too. It's just the experience, just because he's like, "Oh, I don't really know if I want to go to a game," like he says basically, but he doesn't know what it's like. Like, it's just. And Fernando, have you ever been to a Bills game at all, or no?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Just TV, man. Yeah,
Okay, so
and
so one thing I'll say is that, like, the TV experience. Of course, I'm 40 now, so like TV experience is still really good. Don't get me wrong.
yeah.
I don't think I could get season tickets again, because where I live in the Rochester area, which is like an hour outside Buffalo. So you're talking like a 12-hour Sunday, right? And
Yeah,
then, like, we always podcast Sunday nights, and that always takes a couple of hours. So you're talking me dedicating like 14 hours to the Buffalo Bills, which, I love, but it gets tiring after a while. So
Yeah, yeah.
I would recommend going to one or two games, like to anyone that hasn't been to one, just to be like, it's an experience. But let me tell you, man, like I have never been to a big college game like Michigan versus Ohio State or anything like that, but I've been to Major League Baseball games. I've been to hockey games, like really cool hockey games, NHL games.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all really cool experiences, but there's nothing like a Bills game, and I hope you definitely get to experience it someday soon, because just the energy of the crowd is something that you just can't experience. Because I mean, Bills Mafia is just another breed of
Yeah.
football fan, and it feels like, I mean, people have talked about getting friends of mine have had seats like in those indoor boxes, and I'm like, I don't think I would even want that, because you have to open up the window just to hear the crowd. Like, I want to be in
Yeah,
the crowd, I want to feel it.
yeah, definitely.
So no, it's a cool experience. Just the anthem, the flybys and stuff like that. Like, it's a cool experience. The fireworks, all that stuff. So yeah, there's definitely something to be said from watching it from the couch, for sure. Not paying $15 a beer, for sure. Like, that's great. Just going over to my fridge. But there's something so cool about it. So I mean, I hope you get to experience it. If you do, let me know. I'll meet you there or whatever. I'll bring my co-hosts along with us, because we're always looking for an excuse to
Absolutely.
go to a game. So, but yeah, no, I'm excited to share that with my family. I'm excited. It's almost like a rite of passage, really.
Yeah,
So
it's gonna happen. Sometime it's gonna happen. And I'm glad you mentioned the fans, the different vibes in the Bills games, and the beer, because I have a quick a quick um, I have a quick video here to show you from Jay Space, the King. Jay Space has one quick message for you. Sorry, that was the word that was missing. A quick message for you about the home opener, right? Right around the home, before the home opener against the Raiders. Quick message for Jay Space, the King.
Bills Mafia is back. Are you ready for it? The third annual Buffalo Rumblings IPA beer release party is going down September 16th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Resurgence Brewing Company located downtown at 55 Chicago Street. I'm going to tell you what, you do not want to miss this event. Come out and hang with Joe, Sarah, and the rest of the Buffalo Rumblings crew for the Megapod. You're going to want to bring your questions and be a part of the live stream. Get involved. It's going to be live. And this year, we're also going to have our friends from Fans of Buffalo joining the party and sponsoring the fun. They're going to be in the house to provide you with all the information you need to make your away game day experience the easiest and the most smooth that you've ever had in your life. I can promise you, they do their job very well. So make sure you make it out Saturday, September 16th, 6 p.m., Resurgence Brewing Company, 55 Chicago Street. Go Bills.
So this home opener will be even cooler than the regular experience going to a home game, huh?
oh yeah, oh yeah. It's interesting. You're talking about home opener. Like, I think that's, what is that, the Raiders game, right? I think
Yeah,
that's the home
yeah.
opener.
Sorry, the Raiders game. Yeah, I was like messing up. My bad.
No, no,
I
no,
messed
no,
up.
no. You're good. You're good, man. Jeez, you talk better than I do, and English is my native language. So, dude, you're good.
I
That
appreciate.
is. I joked around with my co-host, like, we should buy season tickets just so that we could sell like the first game and probably make back half of our money, because that is by far. I mean, the weather's beautiful. I don't- Western New York has some of the most beautiful summers of anywhere in the entire world. That's why you always see, or in the country, I should say. That's why you always see like players coming into training camp. They're like, "Wow, I didn't know it was this nice." It's like, "What did
Uh,
you expect? Snow in July?"
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
we have amazing summers, and it's still summertime until the end of September. So like those first few games, season opener is going to be amazing. The weather's going to be great for tailgating. I mean, people are going to be wearing tank tops. It's going to be an incredible time. It's one of the best games to go to. The energy is going to be incredible, but it's going to be interesting to see with the season opener how the Bills do against the Jets, because I think that's going to dictate the season, or at least how Bills fans are, because there's a little bit of a hangover with Bills Mafia and how that last season, or that last game ended. from the playoffs of the Bengals. So I did a poll and we did a podcast about it where we talked about, there's still kind of a hangover. And like 60% of Bills fans from a poll I did on Twitter were saying there's still a bit of a hangover from last season, which is crazy because I just did that a couple of weeks ago. Training camp had already started. And like I would have guessed 20 to 30% maybe, but the majority of Bills fans are dealing with that. And so if that season opener doesn't go well against the Jets in New Jersey, I mean that might spiral out of control, for a minute. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous, but I'm excited.
Yeah. And man, to close it out, I don't want to take too much of your time. Our time is running out also. So despite me needing to pay attention to your kids, obviously, and enjoying the experience with them, I'm sure you'll be paying attention to the game and especially to some question marks that we still have and the competitions that are going to happen during this preseason game. So what are the keys? What are the places where your eyes, Nate, will be more focused during this game against the Colts?
So, to be honest, I probably won't be watching my kids at all during this game. I'm just going to be watching. No, I'm just kidding. So the good thing about kids' days, there's no alcohol being served. So I'll be like a little bit less likely that something rowdy is going to go on in my section. But I'm going to be honestly like I'll be paying attention to. I mean, the depth chart should probably stand out the most. I mean, that's probably where guys are going to line up. So I'm going to be paying attention to like the big plays by both the Bills or the Colts and seeing who's responsible for them, either good or bad. Like, and I'll probably end up rewatching it after on NFL Plus or whatever, because, I'm looking for those guys to stand out because the red and blue scrimmage is great. If you can even call it a scrimmage anymore, it sounds like it's more just like another padded practice. You hear things in training camp, but again, none of those are game simulated situations where you're truly playing against 11 on 11 in front of a full stadium. That's where you get the people, the athletes that end up becoming clutch, that show out in those circumstances. And then you have the guys that kind of are good during training camp that kind of turtle in those moments. So I'm going to be looking for both of those extremes, one way or the other, to see, if we get some light shed on some of these positional battles. And then, those I'll definitely be paying attention to the most, the positional battles. But also, like, I'm going to be looking for those Dane Jacksons, those Stevie Johnsons, those guys that are under the radar guys, like Balin Spector last year, I would call as one of those guys who looked like he was pretty good. By the way, I'm thinking he's going to get some more snaps now that Terrell Bernard is going to be out for a week or two. So I'm going to be watching him. I'm going to be watching any of those guys that could flash at any position, whether it's Andy Isabella at the slot, later on. I'm looking for, guys that are looking terrible if nobody can block for Kyle Allen, or they're always getting around the right side or the left side. Like, I'm going to be paying attention to that. Guys that are dropping balls when passed to. Like, I'm going to be paying attention to all of the plays that stand out and who is either responsible for them negatively or positively. Now, am I going to base my whole preseason or my whole outlook on them? No. You don't, just like practice to practice, things that you read, observations. I'm not going to put, but I'm going to be looking at that and noticing them and making mental notes of them. And I'm going to talk about them on our podcast Sunday night, which will air Monday afternoon, where we do our sweet, sassy, molassy plays of the game. We're going to go over our wall of famers and wall of shamers from that game. It's kind of like our preseason prep for the podcast, the post-game podcast. But that's what I'm going to look for: players and plays that stand out, good or bad, and just make some mental notes of it and see where it goes.
Awesome, man. Yeah, Cali Bills is saying I want to see a running game, and I totally agree. And I'm really not just the players, but I want to see, since Josh and Diggs aren't playing on the offensive side, I really want to see not just a running game, but I want to see the offense being able to execute well. This no matter if it's Kyle Allen or if it's Matt Barkley running the show. I don't expect to see a lot of awesome big plays by them like Josh does, but I expect them to be able to at least execute and move the offense in a right way. How maybe Dorsey's going to call the shots and how he's going to call the plays. I'm really curious to see if the offense can stay consistent and march downfield consistently, having a nice run game and executing well, and obviously then see those wide receivers. Sheffield has been big talk of one of the big talks of the training camps. If you can continue that during preseason, I think I've heard less than I expected about Short, so maybe he can start to show up during this preseason too. So those are some things that I'd like to see on offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, Marcel mentioned, and he actually asked us if we noticed tactical changes on the defensive side during training camp. It's been reported about McDermott being trying to be more aggressive, showing more pressure looks, and maybe dropping out of it or sending the heat. And so I'm curious to see how he's gonna introduce it or install this kind of game plan to the defense. It's preseason, it's vanilla, but you might be able to see a little bit of that and how Dodson can be in command of this defense. So those are the main things that I'm really looking forward to start watching tomorrow. What do you think about that, Nate? So you can close it out and we can close today's Leading the Charge.
Yeah, I mean, I like what Kelly Bills said about seeing a running game. I mean, we always talk about the weapons around Josh Allen. We didn't even mention, Dalton Kincaid this episode. We didn't talk about Dawson Knox. I mean, we didn't mention that Stephon Diggs is having a great training camp. There's so many storylines, right? But I'm excited to see what they can do with the running game. I mean, Anthony from Cover One mentioned like the 12 personnel and what exactly they can do with that. I don't expect them to run a lot of that because I feel like they're going to save that for the regular season. But just the ability to even run vanilla concepts, right? Like I want to see them be able to run the ball. They were efficient at it last season. They just didn't do it a whole lot. And that may have been because they didn't do it a whole lot. But I'm excited to see what they can do to run the ball because taking anything off Josh Allen's shoulders, instead of making him feel like he has to win the game, which I think is where he falters the most, is when he feels like he has to do it all. And sometimes he has to, but it'd be nice to have a running game threat so that he doesn't have to. It'd be nice to give him a slot option over the middle so he doesn't, so he feels like he can just do that to Dalton Kincaid, 5 times a drive for 6 or 8 yards each for a pop. I definitely want to see the run game. I want to see James Cook out there. I want to see Latavius Murray. I want to see Damian Harris. I want to see Darrington Evans get some run out there. I'm excited to see that this might be the best, run game that the Bills have had in a while. So defensively, though, tactically, definitely the aggressiveness. So I think that's a good point. I'm looking forward to. I think a lot of what the Bills did the past 7 seasons or whatever it was since Leslie Frazier took over was he did a lot of like, this is who we are. We're going to have some game planning and some strategic planning, but this is who we are. We're a nickel defense. We're going to disguise some coverages, but you're just going to have to prove that you can beat us. I think McDermott is going to take it from a standpoint of we're going to show you that we can beat you, but we're also going to game plan for you in a very specific manner so that we're going to disguise coverages. And we're not just going to do it, 20% of the time. Like if you're a good offense, we're going to do it like 50, 60% of the time. And you're not going to go, we're going to show man and it's going to be zone. We're going to show zone and it's going to be man. And you're not going to know what to do. So I'm really excited for McDermott to take over that role. I'm worried about what it's going to do to his coaching strategies and schemes. I'm hoping that Eric Washington can help him out with that during the game when that comes to. But definitely the aggressiveness. And I mean, you're talking about a Bills top 5 offense, and it sounds like the defense made them look pretty silly in the red and blue game. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for him to not just look at like, this is who this guy is. Like, I'm looking for him to change personnel out and strategies out based on who they're playing game in and game out and quarter in and quarter out, depending on what's working and what's not working. So the ability to, never hardline what you're going to do and always be flexible in your thinking and your game planning. So I think that's what you're going to see with the Buffalo Bills. You might not see Taylor Rapp take a snap on some of these games, and some of these other games you might see him in the box for 30% of the game. You just don't know. So I think McDermott's going to take all these chess pieces and use them to his advantage whenever he sees that. He wants to go to like a front which I've been banging the table for forever, I was on another pod, it was the Wandering Buffalo podcast, where you have, Ed Oliver as your defensive tackle pass rusher. You move, Greg Rousseau in at defensive tackle. You have, Von Miller on one side, Leonard Floyd on the other side. And I just came up with a nickname. It's kind of stupid, but the four horsemen of the Sackopolis, right? Like just taking in that, just a full out sack package. Like that's what I
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
And they've kind of been hesitant to do that, but I'd like to see them just do that a lot more, or bring on 5 defensive linemen for once. Like bring in Daquan Jones. I think Daquan Jones can get some pressure too. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they can do, and I think Bills fans should be really excited about the aggressiveness that they'll see. Sure, it might lead to a few more big plays, but maybe we'll finally be able to just stomp out teams when we should, and
yeah,
not keep them in the game longer than they need to be.
absolutely. Nate, I really appreciate you taking your time, and we could talk forever if you wanted, right? The time flew by, and I just wanna thank you for taking your time, coming and giving me the opportunity to have this awesome episode. I really appreciate. I'm sure Bills Mafia appreciate too. Please hit that like button, subscribe to Buffalo Rumblings channel, follow Circling the Wagons podcast too on Twitter, and enjoy your game. Enjoy the game tomorrow, brother. I hope you have a great time with your family there, and the Bills can show us some positive signs going to the season.
Yeah. I'm going to be one of those weird people that wants them to go 3-0 in the preseason, but in the end, it doesn't matter. I mean, we talked about the things I'm going to be looking for. The one thing that I care the most about is that we don't sustain any major injuries, right? Like, I mean, Tyrell Dodson could look terrible or whatever. The offensive line could look in shambles. Just don't get hurt. Just don't get hurt.
Yeah,
Like let's just hope we have an injury-free game. But no, thank you, Fernando. Thanks for asking me to come on. I got to have you on my show sometime. It's funny. Like, I appreciate everyone that commented in the chats, that is listening, liking, subscribing, all that stuff. Like, that does not get lost on me. We were Circling the Wagons was the first podcast on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast network. So this is our 7th year doing it. So
awesome.
it's been a while, and it's been a fun ride. We went from having, thinking it was cool that, 10, 15 people were listening to us or cared that we had to say, or anything that we had to say, and to growing to what it is today. So it's been a fun ride. And, you're one of the best examples of like continuing on that and helping us grow more and become, better, and, helping us, drive us to want to achieve more, and continue this. Like, it's a good culture. It's a good culture we have at Buffalo Rumbling. So
Absolutely.
you're evidence of that, and appreciate, you asking me to come on and just talk Bills, man. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Absolutely, and the doors are always wide open, so you can come back and talk Bills here, no doubt. I actually count on you on being back, so we can have nice chats and talk our Bills. All right,
That sounds good, man. Go Bills. Appreciate it.
go Bills! Thank you, Bills Mafia. See you next Sunday. I'll be back in Portuguese live, talking the preseason game, and right after the live podcast in Portuguese, I will record the podcast for the podcast aggregators in English, my reaction to the game. So next Sunday, Leading the Charge is back. Thank you so much for taking your time, being with us. See you around. Go Bills.